The world is watching closely as President Trump prepares to deliver a pivotal address to the United Nations General Assembly today, a moment charged with global tension and high stakes. But here's where it gets controversial. His speech comes amid ongoing conflicts and diplomatic rifts that could redefine international relations. President Trump is scheduled to speak at the UN General Assembly in New York City at 9:50 a.m. on Tuesday. This annual gathering draws dozens of world leaders, including both allies of the United States and adversaries, such as Iran's president, all convening to present their views and negotiate on pressing global issues. In a recent briefing, Mr. Trump told reporters he intends to discuss the good and the bad happening worldwide. This includes the ongoing war in Ukraine. Sparked by Russia's invasion, a conflict the president has publicly sought to resolve, and the devastating Israel-Hamas conflict in the Gaza Strip, which he has described as a disaster. These two crises dominate the international agenda and will likely feature prominently in his remarks. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt added that the president will also highlight his administration's achievements, particularly emphasizing a series of ceasefire agreements that his team claims to have brokered. These claims invite scrutiny, as the effectiveness and longevity of such deals are often debated among experts and policymakers. Adding complexity to this year's assembly is the decision by several U.S. allies, including the United Kingdom, Canada, and France, to formally recognize a Palestinian state. This move has been met with strong opposition from both the U.S. and Israel. Whether President Trump will address this contentious issue in his speech remains uncertain, but it is sure to spark debate. While in New York, Mr. Trump is expected to hold meetings with key figures, including leaders from Ukraine, Argentina, and the European Union, aiming to advance diplomatic efforts on multiple fronts. In a strikingly blunt statement on CBS Mornings, Secretary of State Marco Rubio dismissed the push by some U.S. allies to recognize a Palestinian state as irrelevant while the war continues. He described it as almost a vanity project. For certain leaders seeking to maintain their global relevance, Rubio argued that this recognition effort has complicated negotiations with Hamas, making it harder to secure concessions necessary to end the conflict. Rubio emphasized that there is currently a window of opportunity to end the Gaza war, and that President Trump is uniquely positioned to broker peace. According to Rubio, every country in the region, and frankly, every country in the world, including many involved in this recognition effort, are begging the president to get involved. He also mentioned an important meeting planned with a majority of Muslim countries, including Gulf states, aiming to secure the release of all hostages and establish safe humanitarian aid without empowering Hamas. Meanwhile, President Trump's speech takes place against the backdrop of his administration's growing estrangement from the United Nations. The U.S. has withdrawn from several UN bodies, including the Human Rights Council and the World Health Organization, and has reduced its financial contributions. The administration has criticized these organizations for their perceived bias against Israel and questioned the effectiveness of their global initiatives. The ongoing war in Ukraine remains a thorny issue. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is also in New York, rallying support from European allies and the U.S. Trump has expressed frustration that the conflict has not been resolved, despite his campaign promises to end it swiftly, citing his personal relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin as a potential advantage that, in his view, has not yielded results. Polish President Karol Nawrocki is expected to address concerns about Russian drones entering Polish airspace, a claim Trump has suggested might have been accidental, a notion Polish officials strongly dispute. On the arms control front, the White House is reportedly aware of Russia's offer to extend a New START nuclear arms reduction treaty for 1 year if the U.S. reciprocates. This treaty, signed in 2010, limits the number of strategic nuclear missile launchers each country can deploy. Security is a top priority during the General Assembly, as evidenced by the U.S. Secret Service's recent disruption of a massive telecommunications network in the New York tri-state area. This network, consisting of over 300 SIM servers and more than 100,000 SIM cards, had the capacity to send 30 million text messages per minute and could have disabled cell phone towers, potentially crippling emergency communications during the assembly. Officials revealed that the network was used by foreign governments and criminal organizations, including drug cartels and human trafficking rings, highlighting the complex security challenges surrounding the event. Looking ahead to the content of President Trump's speech, White House Press Secretary Leavitt indicated he will emphasize the resurgence of American strength globally, outline his administration's accomplishments, and critique what he sees as the decline of globalist institutions that have weakened the world order. Trump hopes to broker peace between Putin and Zelensky, though he acknowledges the deep animosity between the two leaders. He also plans to address the Gaza crisis, calling it a basic disaster that demands urgent attention. An unusual aspect of this year's assembly is the restricted movement of Iranian delegates. While the U.S. is generally obligated to grant visas to UN representatives, even from hostile nations, this year's Iranian delegation faces strict limitations. They are only permitted to access areas necessary for official UN business and are barred from purchasing luxury goods or shopping at wholesale clubs. The State Department justified these restrictions by pointing to the stark contrast between the Iranian regime's elite and the suffering of ordinary Iranians who face poverty and infrastructure failures. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is expected to attend the meetings, despite these constraints. Meanwhile, the U.S. has denied visas to members of the Palestinian Authority, citing national security concerns and accusing the organization of undermining peace efforts. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will address the assembly via video. The Israel-Hamas conflict and the question of Palestinian statehood are set to dominate discussions. Last week, the UN General Assembly passed a non-binding resolution calling for a phased end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and supporting the creation of a Palestinian state. This has led to formal recognition of Palestine by the UK, Australia, Canada, and France, moves the Trump administration dismisses as just more talk and not enough action. French President Emmanuel Macron, who announced France's recognition of Palestine, argues that this step could weaken Hamas. However, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio labeled the move reckless, a criticism Macron called excessive. The Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, is also scheduled to speak, following Israel's recent strike targeting Hamas leaders in Doha, a move condemned by Qatar and criticized by Trump. This week also marks the first major public appearance of Mike Waltz as the newly confirmed U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Waltz, who was approved by the Senate just last week, replaces a long vacancy in this critical diplomatic post. Previously, Waltz served as Trump's national security advisor before being succeeded by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. For those new to the topic, the UN General Assembly is the main deliberative body of the United Nations, comprising all member states. It meets annually starting in September to discuss and vote on global issues such as climate change, human rights, and international security. While its resolutions are generally non-binding, the Assembly plays a crucial role in shaping international norms and fostering dialogue. Share your thoughts and join the conversation, because in diplomacy, every voice counts.